And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm so pleased to be joining you all today to talk about a subject that's been on my mind actually for a number of years. So I'm thrilled to be bringing this topic for all of you to consider. And I call it hyper-personalization at work. So let's get started, shall we? Okay. So we know that the world is changing dramatically. I mean, that's almost become such an obvious statement that you wonder why I'm leading off with this. But it's important to understand the context of the world as we talk about what it means to get really hyper personalized when we talk about the employee experience. And for those of you who may have heard of it, if there's a function for you to raise your hand, please do. I would love to know how many of you are already familiar with this concept. But clearly, with the pandemic, with all the legislative changes that are happening really quite globally, right? The politicization of some really sensitive issues that we used to take for granted has changed people's perceptions of work. And so all of that now bleeds into the workplace. So the first one is the expectation of workplace flexibility, right? 5 years ago, you went into the office 5 days a week, maybe if you were working really hard, 6 or 7, and the office set the hours and set the expectations for when you were supposed to be going in. And then practically overnight, that blew up. And we were all forced to work from home. We had to scramble with our technologies. We had to scramble with our caregiving responsibilities. We had to scramble with soundproofing options at home so that we could work from home. And that has clearly changed the landscape of what work looks like. Also, there's now this notion of instant gratification, that we want pleasure. We want the sensory delivery immediately. And that has changed. Delayed gratification is now instant. We want the like, we want the follow, we want the shares, we want the reposts, we want all of it, and we want it now. And so that, of course, has also changed our expectations of what contentment and satisfaction and gratification looks like at work. Next, sense of belonging. This is one that has been long overdue for all of us in human resources, right? Inclusivity, equity, and yes, a space where we belong. Now, there are some tides that are trying to change this, but that cow has left the barn. It is too late. We have opened that conversation in the workplace. And many of us who are progressive thinkers and believe in access in all parts of our life understand that providing people with a sense of belonging at work means all sorts of good things and lifts all boats. So what does this mean? It means that your employees, right, that we used to see sort of as this one big amorphous cluster, now demand to be seen as unique individuals, right? Each person has their own needs, has their own wants, has their own aspirations. And so we need to start thinking about how do we cater to each individual's needs. And that is hyper-personalization. Already, companies like Amazon, Netflix, Spotify, they know when I'm about to run out of my favorite shampoo. They know what artists I might want to be interested in listening to, and they know what movies to suggest. But the workplace hasn't quite yet caught up. Why is it that we don't know what Jane wants versus what Bob wants, which is what different from what Felipe wants? And that is something that clearly needs to change to keep pace with all the other things that are now meeting that need in the other dimensions of our life. So let's talk about workplace flexibility to start. So some research that we've seen, and this comes from HBR, my previous employer, from 2024, you can see the yawning gap between what employees want and what employers are willing to give. And the biggest gap comes from adapting their location as needed. There was a whole resurgence in the golden visa, people being able to work from anywhere. And now I bet if they were to do the survey again, the having flexibility and wanting flexibility has probably grown even greater, given that now some organizations are forcing employees back to work. They have their RTO mandates. And that is a conversation that has not gone away. In fact, with each increasing mandate, there's probably even more pull from employees to look for opportunities that do provide them with that access and availability. Because even as some employees have returned to work, we haven't caught up to all the changes in their life. So what do we do about their caregiving? What do we do about now that they're now have to pay in commuting fees, whether that's gasoline, time in the car, public transportation, right? We've taken all of that for granted when we went to work from home, and we haven't made those requisite changes so that coming back to the office is easy and more streamlined. The other way that we can hyper personalize the experience is in pay. So let's talk a little bit about that, because what it really means is pay transparency. There's a new expectation around how salary information is shared across organizations. We know, and this is intuitive, right, that high performance should command high pay. And that, of course, leads to productivity improvements. People see a direct correlation, the cause and effect. I do a really good job, I get really good pay. What is an interesting bit of research, however, is that, that even middling performance, there is an expectation of high pay. So it doesn't always match, right? So sometimes not an expectation, that sometimes middling performance delivers high pay, right? And so what does that mean? That means that people still see productivity improvements. This is a really counterintuitive piece of research that we surfaced in HBR.org. Again, we expect that high performance will deliver high pay. We don't expect to see middle of the road performance deliver high pay. So now imagine that your employees find out about that. What does that mean? That changes their expectations of how they should get paid. And it can clearly demotivate people who are high performance and not high pay. So how do we hyper-personalize? We know that things like years of experience, the kind of experience, right, the levels of experience, their technical specialty, those things will drive pay. But are we also aware that things of date of last promotion, the changes in their scope, their previous performance ratings, peer feedback, these are all additional bits of data that can also drive what quantifies pay. And that means that all of those dimensions are different by the individual, which means that you should also be hyper personalizing pay. More often than not, we have these broad bands, we have salary grades that tend to shoehorn people into how they're paid. But in fact, we can get much, much more granular. And as we have more capabilities to analyze pay data, now with the advent of consumer grade AI, we can easily build out an analysis by employee to drive a pay program that is fit for purpose, given each employee's wants. I may want more workplace flexibility. Someone else may want more responsibility. And now we can drive to that based upon the data that we have. Okay, the third area in which hyperpersonalization exists is career progression. More interesting data. Only 54% of global employees consider themselves ambitious. So as we think about this, and this is from a Randstad 2024 report, we think about what does that mean for the next generation of leaders, it means that we are going to fall short because only 34% are not interested. Fully a third of your employee base is not interested at all in taking a management responsibility. So you have half of the employees who are interested, who are ambitious, and a third who are not. So how are you preparing for those people who are otherwise good performers, who have potential, who have unique knowledge that you have trained and helped them acquire? How do you get the others in the funnel for succession planning? So the time that people will wait for promotions is about 5 years in the US. It's even longer in OECD nations. So we're seeing some difference even geographically, but either way, it paints a picture that your time to develop your next generation of leaders is different based upon where you are. So one of the solutions that we have crafted, and this again was at my previous employer, Harvard Business Publishing, home of HBR, was we crafted a job ladder for each family that then very clearly articulated what the skills and competencies were needed for success. So you can see here a sampling for our HR career ladder, the 5 technical competencies that are required, and the 4 levels of experience that are required for advancement to go from HR coordinator to HR manager to vice president of HR. And with this, with the choices of 20 career ladders that we built up at Harvard Business Publishing, it was a bit of a choose your own adventure because some of the technical competencies were redundant across career families. One of my favorite stories is a marketing director who wanted to leave marketing and come over to HR. She had some of the requisite skills as an HR director, but not all of them. So she left marketing, came over to HR as an HR manager because she understood that she didn't fulfill the competencies at the requisite level required of a director. And in 2 years' time, she developed those skills and then could rise back up to reclaim her director title. And again, that's hyper personalized because she wanted to choose her next career step. It's not all linear. It's not all sequential. Some will move leftward, some will move rightward, some may move even backward based upon their situation in life, which means that we have to create pathways that are multidimensional to match the needs and aspirations of your employees. The next area in which hyperpersonalization can prove to be really impactful is in learning and development. You may have seen this chart. This is from Josh Bersin, this is actually far back from 2018, and he was projecting out what he was expecting to see from learning and development. And it's no surprise that in 2025, with artificial intelligence, we're seeing hyper-personalized pathways, right? You fill out an assessment, an inventory, and it will create a learning and development course, especially for you in the modality, in the grade level, in the sophistication, in the complexity of the learning delivered to you just as you want it. And in fact, we know that in a lot of learning and development now, the learning design is actually made with AI because that is what's driving some of it. And the last piece is, of course, culture. How do people show up in each environment is very specific. And so we should tailor environments that meet that. So here's another interesting data point, which is that managers misidentify the hire 82% of the time. That is a shocking failure rate, right? We still haven't quite nailed it. Yes, artificial intelligence is also helping us with recruitment and talent identification, but 82% of the time, we don't get a perfect match. So what that means is that when they arrive, managers have to make up the difference. And in fact, they account for 70% of the variance in employee engagement. There is no other metric, there is no other measure that drives employee satisfaction as much as your manager. So that means you need to put the right managers in the right seats in your organization. So if you think about what drives great leadership ability, it's emotional intelligence above everything else. And again, that's a bit of research that HBR did in 2004. So this is still evergreen. And I think it's actually truer now than even before the pandemic, is emotional intelligence. It's not your financial acumen. It's not your technical expertise. It's your willingness and ability to listen, to be curious, and to shape your leadership to match the needs of the individual that's on your team. So it's self-awareness, it's empathy, and it's relationship management. Those are the three things that make up emotional intelligence in the context of leadership. And this is very different with each individual, right? Which is why the relationship management is so important. Again, what Bob wants is different from Joan, which is different from Felipe. And that empathy, being able to read the signals, being able to pick that up, particularly when we're in a Zoom environment where we're not getting all of the sensory data, is incredibly important. So managers today are at a crossroads, right? They are both strategists and executioners, right? So they're thinking 3 moves ahead while they're doing the work. They're also player and they're coach. And so how do we make them happy? Well, we have to hyper-personalize their experience as well, right? They are being pulled in so many different directions, asked to play so many roles. How are you taking care of your leaders? Are you paying them correctly? Are you giving them the right career opportunities? Are you tailoring learning and development to the way they want it? And then are you creating a culture that's hospitable for them as well? So in closing, right, the notion now is that employees need to be treated as a unique individual. The peanut butter spread that treats everybody alike, even if that means what we think is equity, no longer works. And I would say that this is a pretty sophisticated form of change management, of cultural evolution. I would start with at least leveling the playing field for for all of your employees. But once you've established a foundation of that, then you do need to move to hyper-personalization. And I've often been asked the question, how many organizations do this well? And I've yet to find one that does that well. And that includes those HR functions where I lead. I have seen elements of it work really well, whether it's learning and development, or they have a really strong pay philosophy, or they have a really robust career development program. But I've yet to see one organization bring all of that information together, process and distill all the data points they have about each of their employees so that they can curate a bespoke employee experience. So one of the things that we know about the CFO is they know your numbers. Today's CHRO needs to know the people as well as they know the numbers. And that's really what makes a successful CHRO. And to the extent that you can start equipping your leaders with the information they need so that they can hyper-personalize the experience, that's where we will find success. So we've all heard of the golden rule, which is treat people as you would like to be treated. The next generation of that rule, however, is the platinum rule, which says do unto others as they would want to be done for them. And that's exactly the heart of hyper-personalization. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope there were some thoughts and comments there that you can take back to your own organizations and hopefully that you can implement. I'm the only Angela Cheng-Cimini on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, I'd be happy to do that and talk to you more about how you can hyper-personalize your employee experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Angela. There's so much in there. The points at the beginning around expectation of workplace flexibility, sense of belonging, really hit home, and stuff that we really strongly believe in. Although I've spoken about it for a long time, the instant gratification piece, it's the first time I've seen it put like that. And it makes a lot of sense. And I don't think we talk about it enough, actually, that's what social media is driving and conditioning us to feel that way. I've actually got a comment here, so thank you, Angela. This is so true. Hyper-personalization is the need of the hour, be the ultimate learning for a lot of the organization. So, Mr. Inspired, great name. It kind of leads me to where I was going to get to is why do you think hyper-personalization is so important? I mean, we're finally starting to catch up with employee-facing tech. Like customer tech was always leaps and bounds ahead of employee, clunky old intranets and bespoke made things that just didn't have a good user experience. We kind of have got to a level now where customer and employee tech is of a similar standard, and hyper-personalization is the next phase. Does it need to be balanced though?
For sure. And certainly again with the unleashing of consumer grade AI, I have been seeing new HR technologies emerging that will help to do this, right? That will scrape all the bits and bytes of data to help you understand what's going on at the employee level. So one is tapping into your Outlook calendar, and they can scan your landscape and say, these, 80 employees are spending 95% of their time in meetings. That's a red flag for burnout. So you should have a conversation with them about how do you pull back on meetings. Or they'll scan and say, hey, this is the last time the person got a promotion. This is the last time the person got an above average merit increase. We think that and given that all their performance ratings are at above average, this person is ripe for attrition. These are some things that we can help you do. So the technology is starting to catch up.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I always link it to the computer's listening. When you say, "Oh, I was looking at a holiday to Barbados," and then the next thing you know, your whole internet feed is just pumped full of adverts to Barbados. It's the last thing we want to have happen to our employees. But everything you were describing just then was absolutely fantastic, and would free up so much time to actually focus on that one-to-one relationship and delivering what people need at work. The recognition, the thank you, the structure, the development, everything that people first about. So love to dig into that more with you another time probably, but would love to. And for as long as we've been talking about employee engagement, with Mr. Drucker, managers has been that level. It succeeds or fails at the manager level, and I've never heard the stat around the 70% variance in engagement.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Well, do you remember where that came from? Because I'd love to go.
Yeah, that's a great. It's one of the big ones. It's either a Mercer report or a Deloitte report. It's a big one, and 70% is absolutely that's the number.
Yeah.
Everything else pales in comparison. So your one-on-one relation, it's the truism that people don't leave their companies; they leave their bosses.
Yeah,
and that's that's rooted in.
Yeah, I mean, I just absolutely loved your talk. There's so much there. The 34% not interested in leadership. I just wonder whether that's a human statistic, whether 34% of us are just always not interested in being leaders, or whether that's increased over time and as people are starting to find a work-life balance. But just so much to dig into on that one. So thank you so much, Angela. We've got Greg Simpson. I think everybody can read that.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. So
your leadership development, right, is really important, and making sure that they have the support, because your managers are the linchpin right now, especially middle managers. So when you hear about an organization like Amazon taking that level out because they want to flatten the organization, they're actually cutting right at the muscle of what keeps the organization humming. So
yeah. Well, long live the platinum rule. So thank you so much, and personally very grateful for the community and the world that's listening in right now. And I'm going to follow up with you around a few of these points, because it'd be great to explore a few of them in a different way or in a different format. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Boop.